In 2008, the entire global financial system basically held its breath, teetering right on the edge of a complete and total collapse. So, how did that happen? We're going to break it down. This is a story of greed, some pretty wild deception, and a crisis that, honestly, changed everything. It all started with a massive shockwave. Lehman Brothers. We're talking a 158-year-old giant on Wall Street, a bank that survived world wars, the Great Depression, you name it. Well, it just collapsed. Overnight. And just like that, poof, $600 billion in assets vanished. Now, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around a number that big, but believe it or not, that was just the very first domino to fall. Gone. I mean, people's retirement accounts wiped out. Life savings that took decades to build evaporated. Millions of regular people who had absolutely nothing to do with high finance suddenly found their lives completely turned upside down. So the big question is, how did we get here? How did the American dream of owning a home twist and curdle into a full-blown global nightmare? Well, let's get into it. Okay, so our story really kicks off in the early 2000s. Remember, after the dot-com bubble burst in 9/11, the U.S. economy was feeling pretty shaky. So to get things moving again, the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates, which made money incredibly cheap to borrow. And what did everyone want to buy with that cheap money? A house. Banks were so desperate to give out loans that they came up with this brand new, unbelievably risky thing called the Ninja Loan. And yes, it stands for exactly what you see. No income, no job, or assets. I'm not kidding. They were literally handing out huge loans to people with no documented way of ever paying them back. Yeah, this quote from our source material really says it all, doesn't it? I mean, all the old rules about lending, like proving you could afford the loan, they were just tossed right out the window. It was a total gold rush, and it was all built on this one belief, that housing prices could only go up forever. So, you've got millions of these super risky loans out there. What does Wall Street do with them? Well, this is where they performed what you could call a little financial magic trick. Here's how the trick worked step by step. First, they took thousands of these risky mortgages and bundled them all together into something called a mortgage-backed security. Okay, fine. But then, and this is the crazy part, they paid rating agencies to slap a AAA rating on these bundles. That's the safest rating you can get. Finally, they sold this repackaged junk to pension funds, to cities, to investors all around the world who had no idea what was inside. They thought they were buying gold. This analogy is just perfect because it gets right to the heart of the problem. A massive conflict of interest. The people who were supposed to be the independent referees, the rating agencies, were getting paid by the very banks they were rating. So the incentive wasn't to be honest. It was to keep the banks happy so the money would keep flowing. And this is what you get. On a label, on the outside, it all looked like a perfect, safe, grade A investment. But the reality, what was actually inside, it was toxic. It was basically financial plutonium, built on a mountain of loans that were always going to fail. But here's the thing. Not everybody was drinking the Kool-Aid. There was this small group of outsiders and weirdos who actually looked at the numbers and saw the whole system was rotting from the inside. And they didn't just walk away. No. They decided to make a massive bet that the whole thing was going to come crashing down. So they used this brand new financial tool called a credit default swap. You can think of it like an insurance policy on those risky mortgage bundles. You pay a little bit of money, and if that investment fails, you get a huge payout. But the truly wild part was you could buy this insurance on a house you didn't even own. It was basically like taking out a fire insurance policy on your neighbor's house and then hoping it burns to the ground. So what you had, really, was the entire global financial system turned into this giant wobbly Jenga tower. Every single block was a bad mortgage, a lie on an application. And with every new product, every new bet, the tower just got taller and shakier. But hey, everyone was making way too much money to stop playing the game. And then, by 2007, someone finally pulled the wrong block. All those ninja loans, all those adjustable rate mortgages, they started to go bad. People just couldn't make their payments anymore. The dream was officially turning into a nightmare. And you know, the collapse happened so fast. It started with those first cracks in 2007. Then came the earthquake, September 15th, 2008. Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt. And that just sent panic through the entire system. Because if Lehman could fail, anyone could fail. And just like that, the credit markets, which are like the plumbing of the whole global economy, they just froze. Solid. The human cost was just devastating. And this wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. $19 trillion in wealth, just gone. 8 million Americans lost their jobs. 4 million families lost their homes. And that right there, that's the key. That's what you have to remember about all of this. The fire may have started on Wall Street, but it spread like crazy. And it was Main Street, regular families, workers, small business owners that got burned the absolute worst. So the government found itself with this impossible choice. Do you let the entire system just implode, or do you use taxpayer money to save the very banks that caused the whole mess? Well, they chose to save them. And the sheer scale of the bailout was mind-blowing. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars from taxpayers getting funneled into banks, insurance companies, even car companies. All of it to stop a full-blown second Great Depression. But you can imagine, for most people watching this, the contrast was just infuriating. Wall Street gets bailed out and, in a lot of cases, goes right back to paying out enormous bonuses. Meanwhile, on Main Street, you had people standing in unemployment lines and getting eviction notices on their doors. All that simmering anger eventually just boiled over into a real social movement. You probably remember this. In 2011, the Occupy Wall Street protesters showed up in New York and other cities, and they used this slogan to shine a huge spotlight on the massive inequality the crisis had laid bare for everyone to see. Their point was pretty clear. The system felt totally ripped. When the banks made money, they kept all the profits. But when they lost, the public, the taxpayers, had to pay for their losses. And maybe the most frustrating part of all, not a single major Wall Street CEO ever saw the inside of a jail cell for their role in the crisis. So yeah, the system didn't totally collapse. It survived. But the trust in that system, that was shattered. And it leaves all of us with a really unsettling question. Did we actually learn our lesson? Because if 2008 taught us anything, it's that the next crisis is probably already out there, hiding in plain sight, looking profitable, looking totally harmless, until one day, it isn't.